Hello and welcome, stargazers. This is APM, your intrepid star guide, and this is the Outlaw Astrology podcast, where we discuss the stars from the perspective of the outlaw, in that we want to be true to ourselves and to our own personal codes. So this week this is a re-release of an episode which is from our 7th season and the 7th episode. We're going to be talking about astrology and numerology. And thank you for tuning in. If this is your first time here, thank you very much. And if you've been hanging around for a while, thank you very much as well. And if you could be so kind as to like, to subscribe, and to review, please give us 5 stars so others can find us as well. And you can find us on Pinterest. Yeah, and you can find us on YouTube, and you can find us on Instagram at The Outlaw Astrology for Instagram and Outlaw Astrology for YouTube and Pinterest. Those links will be in the show notes. We have a newsletter called The Daily Stargazer. That link is also in the show notes. And if you'd like to leave a one-time donation, much appreciated, you can find that link as well in the show notes. And now, onward. Alrighty, so what we're going to do is talk about how you can use astrology and numerology together. What I'm going to do is encapsulate actually 2 previous episodes and do so a little bit more quickly than I'm used to doing. And so we're going to start with the more complicated of the 2, which is called Pythagorean numerology. That is the most common form of numerology that one will see out there. You will see Chaldean, but that one's a bit more complex. So we're going to start with introducing the Pythagorean system, and then we're going to talk about this system and another system that I mentioned on the podcast, and see how the 2 could possibly work together. And then we will explain the meaning of the numbers. And then we will do a chart reading example, and there we are. So, basically, Pythagorean numerology comes from ancient Greece. Pythagoras, numerologist, I would say mathematician and philosopher. Everybody there was a Renaissance person, so it was not unusual for them to be scientists and also to be interested in what we would consider to be, in modern times, to be fringe sciences or fringe topics of interest. And so I got into astrology via numerology because I was a numerologist first. I found it extremely fascinating. It's the simple system. It has 9 numbers in that system, as opposed to Chaldean, which only has 8, because the 9th number in Chaldean is considered a divine number, and so it's uber special when you encounter it in a chart reading, which is why they don't want it to make it quite as common as the Pythagorean system. Now, this system, as I said, has 9 numbers, and you would simply use the 9 numbers to help you interpret. So say the sun is at 3 degrees. If you know Pythagorean numerology, you would then use that to help you better interpret the chart. Now, the previous system that I mentioned comes from an astrologer, and I have to find the website because it seems to have gone bye-bye on me. But it is more simple, and basically it takes 29 degrees of a sign and attributes each number to a number of the zodiac. So 1 through 12, you would just simply place that 1 with Aries and the 12th with Pisces. When we start again at 13, that is Aries, and the 24th would be Pisces. And when we start one more time, the 25th would be Aries, the 26th would be Taurus, the 27th would be Gemini, the 28th would be Cancer, the 29th would be Leo, and then we are done. So some of the early zodiac numbers, all the way from Aries to Leo, all have 3 numbers And you would then, if anything at those degrees, like for example, Aries 1, 13, and 25 would be Aries degrees. And so you would add a little bit more of the Aries spirit into that interpretation. The whole purpose of either system is ease of interpretation, but it also provides a bit more nuance, because most of the time we do not look at the degrees and say to ourselves, well, it's just 1 degree, and we use that mostly to look at aspects and how the planets talk to each other. So the whole purpose would be to provide a sense of nuance with chart reading and maybe more depth. So if you've got the sun and it is in Cancer, but it's at the 1st degree of Cancer, and by the way, the sun, not entirely the most comfortable in sign of Cancer for the first thing. That's not numerology, that's just astrology interpretation. It prefers the moon, but since I've put it there for this example, I would read that 1 degree sun. First of all, it is in the 1st decan of Cancer, which means it is a Cancerian, and I would also look to find out what the moon happens to be doing, because that would be very important with the interpretation. Next, I would look at house, because that's a totally different vibe. And then I'd come to like that 1st degree, and I think, okay, that's Aries degree. So this person probably, even if their sun is in Cancer, would be more assertive and be more prone to go their own way, more than, say, if we just had a regular, if we're going to interpret the sun in Cancer in the more traditional way, which is that's a Cancer sun and they're going to act very much like a homebody. They might indeed do that. But home and belonging are very important to Cancer suns, because that's how they express themselves and how they expand their consciousness. But they would tend to be more assertive with their family members and people they consider family and friends, whether they be found or by blood. And they, more assertive, they'd stand up for themselves a bit more, they'd break rules a bit more, they'd want to blaze trails a bit more, and particularly depending on what house this happens to be, because this is nurturing energy. So if it's in the 9th house, nurturing unique points of view and connections with people with unique points of view. And that assertiveness for a sun in Cancer at the 1st degree would look a lot like standing up for how they feel. This is how I feel. You don't have to agree, but this is how I feel. And being able to verbalize it, particularly if Mercury is alongside for the ride. So that is how I mean by nuance. I know a lot of people out there in the world who do not believe in astrology are like, 1 sign, how is it possible that 12 signs can explain everybody, billions of people in the world, or people who used to exist? And the answer to that question is, it does not. That is the whole purpose of learning the art and the craft of chart interpretation. It absolutely does not, which is why in my case I have a tendency to put more emphasis on the ascendant, because in a traditional astrology, the ascendant actually is who you are. So if I put that 1 degree Cancer and gave it to the ascendant, we got someone who really is interested in home and hearth and belonging. That's their identity. They're looking for their people. They're looking for what feels safe, what feels home, whom they can be vulnerable with, whom they can share their feelings with, whom they can start to bloom and nurture emotional intelligence with. Now, that 1st house, for this particular example, the sun in Cancer at the 1st degree, in the 1st house, the 1st house is actually how you see you, not a mask, not how other people see you. How other people see you, that's the 10th house, that's the midheaven, otherwise known as the MC. But in the 1st house, we're talking about who you are, that's your perspective on you. So, a person with this particular sun at the 1st degree of Cancer might see themselves as a caring, nurturing person, and they're learning emotional intelligence. They're learning to be emotionally mature. They're learning to feel their feelings but not get carried away by them. But since it's a sun in Cancer, not the moon in Cancer. This means this is a skill that they're learning, that they're going to have to continue to learn throughout their life. And so whenever a planet in Cancer, or when a transiting sun or moon activates that particular chart point, that particular house and its themes will be activated by a transit or by a progression, for example. And so that's just to give you an idea. Now, if we're going to interpret by the numbers, now we have to do Pythagorean numerology, because the other numerology I mentioned is very zodiacally based, meaning that if you know how to interpret Aries in a chart, whenever you see a planet at 1 degree, regardless of whether or not it's Cancer, you're going to add a little assertiveness. You're going to add some of that trailblazing, pioneering, go my own way type of vibe. I want to be the first to do it. Aries energy isn't interested in being the best to do it, unless it's, unless Mars is particularly there, or Mars is in some other sign that is interested in being the best. They want to be the first. If there's a mountain, they want to be the first to climb it. Okay, so just to give you an idea. So that is how zodiacal numerology might work. Now the Pythagorean one, it's a bit more complicated. So let's go quickly through what the numbers mean. So number 1, that would be the leader, the trailblazer, the pioneer. They tend to be more restless and tend to be more, as I said, go their own way, more assertive. They can be independent. They can be determined and self-assured. And then on the downside, they can be very stubborn, very impatient, and very self-centered. Number 2s are the peace lovers. They desire harmony. The energy tends to be more gentle, considerate, and sensitive, so the keywords there would be diplomatic, peaceful, warm, sensitive. But the downside of this would be a little too clingy, a little too manipulative, and sometimes indirect in expressing their needs in a way that comes off as hostile. Number 3, those are the joy lovers, the creatives. So I'm going to call it the artist. They're sociable, they're friendly, they're outgoing. They can be kind, they can be positive, they can be definitely optimistic, having a great sense of humor. They like to enjoy life. So some of the keywords would be friendly, adventurous, self-expressive. However, some of the downside traits would be scattered, superficial, a little over the top, Number 4s are the strategists of the numerology pantheon. And they are practical, they love detail. They are trustworthy, hardworking, and helpful. So some of those words are going to be the key words. The downside will be stubborn and sometimes quite narrow, and they get stuck quite easily. Number 5s are the explorers. They're intellectuals. They are the idea people. They love change, they love variety, they love novelty, and have the ability to adapt to many different situations. So some of the keywords for them would be freedom-loving, resourceful, curious, etc. However, the downside would be non-committal, inconsistent, and quite scattered. At least that's how it would look from the outside. For most of these, if people are watching a person with these strong number energies within, outside, that would be some of the downside, would be some of the things other people might say. Number 6 is the nurturer. They are loving, they are stable. They also like harmony like the 2s. Some of their keywords would be compassionate, family-loving, trustworthy. But the downside is not always interested in changing, can be a little overprotective, and can be a bit needy energy-wise, and sometimes also controlling. Number 7s are the mystics of the numerology pantheon, and it is a spiritual vibration. You will note, anyone who has studied to any degree numerology or astrology, etc., 7 is a spiritual vibration. And so 7s are not particularly attached to to material things or the material world for that example. They are introspective, they can be a bit more quiet, and so the keywords for them would be introspective, reserved, intuitive. Sometimes people might see them as psychic, but also the downside would be melancholic, eccentric in a way that is hard to connect to, and not easy to pin down, so very enigmatic. Number 8s are the manager. They are the powerhouse. They are strong. It's a more material energy, number 8 is. It's very successful. Some of the keywords would be ambitious, practical, business-minded, accomplished. And some of the downsides would be narrow, materialistic, and forceful. Now, number 9 is the humanitarian, or the bodhisattva. And this energy tends to be tolerant, sympathetic, and keywords would be humanitarian, helpful, emotionally tolerant, and some of the downsides would be impractical, a bit restless, and sometimes quite sensitive. Okay, so those are the numbers. Now we have master numbers as well, so I'm going to go on and share those as well. And so number 11 is considered like a master healer type number. It is the innovator. So I would say the innovator. It is a streak of humanitarianism. Keywords tend to be idealistic, intuitive, considerate, steadfast. And the downside would be a bit oversensitive, and might try to do a little more than they should. So maybe over-promising and under-delivering sort of thing. The number 22 is the master builder, and that is basically 4 energy amplified. So they are idealistic, and they can be visionaries. Now, here's the thing. I would attribute being idealistic and visionary to the number 11, not the 22. The 22s are the master builders. They tend to be intense, but they're achievers. They're focused. They're determined. Those are their keywords. And then, negatively expressed, they can be destructive because they may burn out very quickly. They're very determined and so focused, and so can be very narrow in their focus, which could lead to overworking and burnout. Okay, so those are some of that's the numbers, and that's the way I interpret them. So let's talk about a chart example. I tend to use whole sign houses. I use Rihanna. Now I'm going to say that Rihanna's chart is the accuracy, in my opinion, is in question, and so I am going to use it because I like some of the details that her chart has. So the first thing I'm going to do is note that the sun is at 1 degree in the 12th house, and it's in Pisces. So that gives the ascendant, makes the ascendant Aries. So we're going to start with the sun at 1 degree in the 12th house. So how would I interpret that? Well, Pisces energy, the sun is about, let's start with the sun first. The sun is about consciousness. It is what people might call the ego. It is whom we're becoming, whom we're expanding into. If it is in Pisces, this person is a mystic, a dreamer, People may not automatically see that. Why? Because the 12th house is the place of hidden traits, which means that people will see the ascendant, and for the sake of this chart, the ascendant is in Aries. They might see the Aries part more because that is the part that is going to show itself the most, and is how Rihanna might see herself, as a powerful, bold, trailblazing Aries. And so her sun at the 1st degree in a 12th house would be hidden traits. That mystic, that dreamer, would not be easily integrated into the personality just yet, because it takes time and experience. And why? Because the 12th house and the 1st house are not actually in a aspect per se. All aspects are from the position of the ascendant looking out at the rest of the chart. So this would not be an aspect, a major aspect. It would be a very minor aspect. And so that means that maybe at first, before Rihanna gets experience, and she would have a lot, because her ascendant is at 15 degrees of Aries, which makes Mars the chart ruler. So 15 degrees of Aries is pretty midpoint in to that first house. And that means that she's going to want to have a lot of experiences. She's going to want to go her own way, do things in her own time, in her own way, with as little minding and oversight from someone over her shoulder, whether that authority figure be a caretaker or a teacher or a producer or whatever. She's going to want to try it out her first. And all of those mistakes, and which there will be many because we all make mistakes while we're trying to figure out who we are, that information can then be used later to wake up that sun. And that sun's going to also be awakened by transiting sun, moon, other planets, awakening that chart by being square, by being either in a conjunction, which is not technically an aspect, or being in a square or an opposition, because we learn through discomfort, not through ease. So trines are where it feels natural, but we might tend to lean on it because it's comfortable rather than stretching ourselves outside of our comfort zones. So back to that sun in Pisces at 1 degree. 1 degree, she's a little bit more assertive than your average Pisces, which there are no average Pisces. But she's a bit more assertive, still sensitive, so if her feelings get hurt, she's more likely to speak up and say something about it. Whereas other people, Pisces who don't have this ascendant and don't have that Mars where it happens to be, we're going to get to that in a bit, they're less likely to speak up because they don't have those particular chart points that Rihanna has in her chart. Okay? So she's more likely to speak up. And she may not yet know that she is a dreamer or a mystic or anything like that. Because, as I said, 12th house is hidden traits. Now, the moon is at 11 degrees, and it is in Aries, right alongside of the ascendant. So that's a 4-degree orb. That means it's pretty close. And that means that she wears her heart on her sleeve. If she's upset, you're probably going to know it. Anybody around her is going to know it. She might verbalize that upset to people close. And that moon is that she is determined. She does want to go her own way. She wants to do it herself and probably not going to ask for tons of advice unless that person is someone that she trusts or believes in. And since that moon is in the first house, any planets in the first house have a lot to do with who that person is, how they see themselves. So a trailblazer, a pioneer, someone who's assertive, someone who's courageous. Now, by the way, that moon and that ascendant is guided by Mars in Sagittarius at 28 degrees. So just to give you an idea right there. So Sun in Pisces is Pisces energy, but a little bit more assertive, sensitive, but that sensitivity will probably be very protected by, the ability to assert. This is how I feel. If she's upset and they're close friends, she's going to tell them all about it. She'll feel comfortable doing so. The moon at 11 degrees, that's the Aquarian degree. So we're going to do two things here, I've just realized. We're going to do both of the different ways. So the first way, I would do that first. That is when I did the Aries degree. That's how I got there. When I'm looking at Sun in Pisces at the first degree using the Pythagorean system, this person's a leader. This person doesn't look to other people. This person is courageous and focused and confident. She could be shivering in her boots based on that interpretation, using the Pythagorean system. She could be shaking in her boots, but she's going to present as confident. Most people are going to see her as confident because she believes that she's confident, okay? So that's Pisces at the first degree is a confident leader. But this might not be a trait that is easily understood or seen by Rihanna herself. Other people might see it, but it's not something she may see immediately. She needs to have those Aries experiences with her moon and her ascendant before she's able to uncover those experiences, okay? Now, the moon is at 11 degrees of Aries, which puts it in the second decan, that's the Leo decan, which is ruled by the sun. So she is sensitive. So the sun right there rules that second decan, and the moon rules that okay, so I've got this, never mind. Anyway, the moon is ruled by the sun, is a co-leader. Okay, so I would look to that sun to understand, she is sensitive, and she'd probably hide that. We don't live in a society where you can put your heart on your sleeve, and if you do, you have to be protective. So she has some protective energy. It is that sun in Leo. That sun in Leo can be warm, friendly, self-expressive, friendly, have a great sense of humor, and a temper. Now, if we're going to do first the Pythagorean, that 11 degrees is an innovator, a creator, someone who wants to walk out front of everybody else and get there first, to be the first to do something, to innovate something that would be ordinarily stagnant. So when we're looking at this moon is naturally an innovator, naturally a visionary, and probably wouldn't immediately know it, but would have an inkling on a very deep unconscious level personally until circumstances and through external experiences led her to understand who she actually was. And that ascending at 15 degrees, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, I'm speeding by, ADHD is a real thing, folks. Anyway, that 11th degree in Aries is very Aquarian. So, definitely innovation, but also a little bit aloof and also humanitarian. So, might feel a little bit like a rebel, or might feel a little bit like an outcast or an outsider. Next, ascending at 15 degrees, Pythagorean, we would break that down into a single number, which would be 1 plus 5 would be 6. So a nurturer. So the ascendant is a nurturing energy, a caring energy. And so that energy right there, we got someone who likes peace, who likes calm. Now, you see the nuance, and you might notice some clashes between what I've said about the moon and what I've said about the ascendant, and that is people. I am telling, based on this chart, I see a person who is complex and who sees themselves in a way that is more multifaceted than any of us are led to believe that we are capable of being. Okay, so a caring person, a nurturing person, someone who likes peace, someone who likes harmony. But you may not see it automatically at first blush, but it's in there. Okay, but if I'm going to do it using the zodiacal system, 15 reads as a totally different energy. So recall that I said that Pisces would be the 12th degree, which means 13 is Aries, 14 is Taurus, and the 15th degree would be Gemini, which makes this Mercury ruled. And that means this is a thinky energy. And it means that she would tell herself a story about being bold or courageous. And to be clear, as a person of color, wearing a feminine presenting body, one would need courage. One would need to be bold. And by virtue of those two traits being a thing, kicking open doors and being the first to do something becomes more common. So that's how we get that. So Aries at that 15th degree, someone who can nurture, someone who could be sensitive, someone who might be a more emotionally mature, or the potential to be more emotionally mature and intelligent than most people would give. Most people who study astrology would give Aries credit for. So you see, it's a little bit more nuanced. Now, the chart energy is Aries energy, and that means that signature that would be unconscious and could be potentially made conscious is Mars ruled. That's Aries energy, which means Mars is in Sag at the 28th degree in the 9th house. As I said, it rules the chart. This is the Mars as a philosopher. Mars is inspiring, enthusiastic. It has a what I would call more of a holistic, expansive view, whereas Gemini is more detail and spot focused. Our Jupiter ruled Mars in Sagittarius, that would give us a bit more expansiveness. So there would be a worldview and a belief system that would make her more philosophical, even though it's in the 9th house, by the way. So that means, and it's at home, so comfortable energy. That means that at heart, she's a philosopher, and she wants to inspire, and she's enthusiastic, and she wants to learn and expand and understand. And that means taking a more holistic view and a view with altitude, meaning being able to zoom out and look at the big picture. Now, at the 28th degree, using the Pythagorean system, we would add the 2 to the 8 and we would get 10, and then break that down into 1. So someone who wants to lead. So someone who more than likely would lead by example and would be motivated by their convictions and what they believe is right and their ethics to take action. So anything she does, her ascendant, her moon, all of that is going to be based on her worldview, her beliefs, her ethics, and her world philosophy. That is going to lead things to whatever, for good or for ill, and to whatever degree we're talking about consciousness, how conscious that is. Okay? Just because someone, just because someone has these chart aspects does not naturally mean they're at play at all times. They are not. They get activated. So during Sagittarius season, for example, when the sun is in Sag, it will be activated. When the moon is in Sagittarius, and that happens once a month for about 2 to 3 days, it'll get activated. Or one of the other planets move into Sagittarius, then activation will occur, or by progression, this energy gets activated, and these ideas, her philosophy, her worldview becomes very important. Okay, and then she's more open to listening to other people share their worldviews. Okay, so that's just to give you an idea. Now, the sun's degree, the moon's degree, that's to give you an idea. Now, if we're going to be doing the astrological, well, then we're going to start. Aries would be 25, 26 would be Taurus, 27 would be Gemini, and 28 would be Cancer. And so we would have a bit more of a sensitive energy. So whereas Mars and Sagittarius would just go their own way and, like most fire energy, not always consider the feet they're going to trample on, because Sagittarius is symbolized by the centaur. So people's feet are going to get stepped on while the Mars in Sagittarius learns things. But at 28 degrees, there's a sensitivity there, more of an emotional intelligence, which means they're learning to be more emotionally intelligent. They're learning to be less blunt. They're learning to share their information, what they've learned, their worldview, their beliefs, their ethics in a way that is not as insensitive to other people and their feelings. So, that would be some of the ways that you could absolutely look at a chart, think about a chart. And that is how I tend to go. Now, either way is fine. If you're more into Pythagorean numerology, you might lean to one. However, if you want the ease of simplicity, using the more zodiacal style would be more helpful. I tend to go back and forth between the two because I find benefit in them all, in them both. But to each his own. I think everybody knows themselves well, and I think everyone knows what's right for them. Those are my beliefs. So I think everyone should feel free to experiment with both and see which one resonates the most. Okay? And so the key takeaway here is that numerology is not meant to be destiny any more than astrology is. It is merely a tool that can help you better understand yourself, your place in the world, and understand others as well. And the choice is always going to be ours to make. How much this resonates, how true it is up to us to decide. Using our own values, our own hearts, our own souls, our own spirits, our own ethics, our own worldview, our experiences. And with that said, you can find the Outlaw Astrology on YouTube, Instagram at The Outlaw Astrology, and Pinterest at Outlaw Astrology. YouTube is also Outlaw Astrology. There is a lovely newsletter called The Daily Stargazer. And if you'd like to support the podcast, much appreciated. We do have a tip jar. All these links are located in the show notes. Thank you very much for listening. Peace and astro magic, stargazers.